From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. We begin in Honduras, where on Sunday, medical specialists from the Cuban Henry Reef Brigade arrived. The group of 16 were seen on the runway at the Ramon Villeda Morales Airport in San Pedro Sula. They were greeted by a round of applause for their assistance as Honduras takes on COVID-19. This brigade includes 4 emergency specialists, 2 epidemiologists, 6 intensive care nurses, and 4 biomedical technicians. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, said that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the date for parliamentary elections to be held this year remains uncertain. He highlighted that these elections need to take place in 2020.
At this point, I really don't know if there are going to be parliamentary elections this year because we have this priority, the pandemic, and it will be irresponsible for me to say there is absolutely has to be elections. It will be irresponsible. The election for the National Assembly is obligatory. According to the Constitution, it has to happen in 2020, this year, because on January 5, 2021, the new National Assembly has to take up its role by constitutional mandate.
The Communications Minister has announced a curfew for the state of Nueva Esparta effective Sunday night. This in hopes of stopping a COVID-19 outbreak that started at a baseball training academy.
President Nicolás Maduro Moros has taken the decision to decree a curfew that must be respected by all in the state of Nueva Esparta, which begins today at 8 p.m. until tomorrow at 10 a.m. And from tomorrow, April 20th, there will be a curfew from 4 p.m. on April 20th until 10 a.m. on April 21st. And that curfew will remain in effect until the authorities can inform the country that the road has been controlled or all cases have been detected.
Brazil's far-right president, Jair Bolsonaro, has once again spoken out against social distancing to combat COVID-19, saying that Brazilians should not cower in the face of the virus. During a religious pro-life rally in Brasilia, Bolsonaro once again called on his supporters to break the quarantine, in direct contradiction of the recommendations of the World Health Organization and most experts. With over 2,000 deaths registered so far due to the novel coronavirus, Brazil's new health minister, Nelson Teich, had also said he agrees with the president's decision. In Chile, the controversy between state officials and Sebastián Piñera's government has been aggravated after the announcement on Friday that state employees must get back to work to gradually staff state offices. Chile's National Association of State Employees, together with the Workers' United Center of Chile Union Federation and other workers' organizations, have said their members will not report for work in person, and instead they will continue to work from their homes. They accuse the government of promoting a criminal act. Welcome back. Let's continue with news. 5 people have died in a stampede when displaced people were receiving aid in northeastern Nigeria. The dead include women and children, who are the largest group of the hundreds of people displaced by militant attacks in the city of Gamboru. The area has been reportedly and repeatedly targeted by Boko Haram insurgents since August 2014. And it's business as usual in Malawi, after the country's high court on Friday temporarily barred the government from implementing a 21-day lockdown to curb the coronavirus, following a petition by a human rights group. The Malawi Human Rights Defenders Coalition argued that the government had failed to announce any measures to support the poor during the lockdown.
Big question of whether we've been past the apex, past the high point, and it turned out the high point wasn't a point, but the high point was a plateau, and we got up to a high point, and then we just stayed at that level for a while. But if the data holds, and if this trend holds,
A team of Chinese medical experts has arrived in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, to help the country fight the COVID-19 pandemic. For CGTN, Girum Chala has been following this.
This China Air flight arriving in Addis Ababa has brought over 12 Chinese medical experts. The first batch of medical professionals is here to support Ethiopia's battle against the coronavirus, as well as advise the Africa Centers for Disease Control.
This is a very strong delegation, and they will help Ethiopians to enhance its ability, because this pandemic is a very serious threat to the humanity. So only by international cooperation, by strengthening international cooperation, can we defeat the common enemy.
These medical professionals from China have been on the front line of Chinese fight against COVID-19, and they have had the experience of handling many cases, as we've been told. But more important for Ethiopia is now the kind of contribution they have brought with them here that is going to help this country defeat the coronavirus.
This is our team. We have we have ICU doctor, we have nurses, we have a respiratory physician, we have someone from CDC for epidemiology. We also have from emergency department, and I'm ID physician. So we have a variety of the specialties.
Ethiopia has considered China's effort of sending these medical professionals alongside different medical consignments as a strong gesture of solidarity and friendship.
China had faced this difficulty before, and then now they are overcoming it, almost they are defeating it, and then now they are lending their hands for friends. Now Ethiopia is one of its closest friends, and then this is also the epitome of that strong fraternal relationship.
The Chinese medical experts have a lot ahead of them, as number of COVID-19 cases are rising by the day in Ethiopia and across the continent. The team will be operating alongside their Ethiopian counterparts.
Because we have continuously worked for fighting COVID-19 for 3 months, we come here to try to provide some kind of help, to share some of our experiences from the front line. So we will see what we can do here, depending on the local situations.
China has already said it will send similar medical missions to the rest of the African continent soon.
Welcome to Ethiopia.
Grumchala, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Now to South Africa. The country has over 3,100 confirmed cases of COVID-19. The Minister of Health, Dr. Sweli Mkhize, announced on Saturday night that over 114,000 people have been tested in the African nation. Meanwhile, the COVID-19 death toll in South Africa has risen to 54. The country has the largest number of confirmed cases in the continent, although Egypt is not far behind and has reported more than 4 times the fatalities. Authorities in South Africa, who are struggling to contain the coronavirus, are now facing a new challenge as communities struggle to cope with life under the current lockdown. Several cases of looting and break-ins at shops and stores have been reported. CGTN's reporter René Del Carme has more.
Social media images of looting in some of Cape Town's poorer communities have become a trend during the lockdown year. Many who have no income at the moment are battling to put food on the table. And the ban on alcohol and tobacco sales has led to break-ins at grocery and liquor stores.
I think it's a mixture of desperation and criminality. There are certainly some people who are struggling badly now. The lockdown has unintended financial consequences. The immediate food security and the inability to have money because of the lockdown. And for those people, the poverty and the lack of food is an immediate reality, not a distant risk.
Authorities have urged small retailers to take extra precautions to secure their property, even encouraging liquor outlets to move their alcohol stocks to safer provincial government warehouses during the lockdown.
Important to note that we did talk to some businesses about things that they could do to make themselves safe in terms of additional security, additional burglar bars, closing any security doors you may have and serving through those security doors, as many businesses are doing. And also, in the case of liquor stores, transporting the content of the store to a place for safekeeping.
Nearly 1,000 arrests have been made during the past 3 weeks, more than 50 of them in connection with the looting. And there's growing concern about people not adhering to the lockdown laws to help flatten the coronavirus curve.
I think we have deteriorating levels of compliance. South Africa's infection rates have bucked the international trends. We've not had the same take-up of infections. We've often had a linear and not exponential growth. And so everybody expected a lot of sick people. Now there are not sick people, and I think a lot of people are now relaxing their commitment to the lockdown.
Meanwhile, the mass screening and testing for COVID-19 and raising awareness about the imminent threat of infection have all been stepped up.
These are our volunteers who are at home, and they're offering up their time and effort to come. So they go out in groups of 30 to 40, and they go out into the communities talking about the need for hygiene, the issue around social distancing, and just general prevention and awareness. So it's proved to be invaluable.
City of Cape Town officials have warned the people of the Western Cape not to become too complacent about the COVID-19 lockdown, especially since South Africa is still expected to see a surge in the number of people infected with the disease in the coming months. Renee Dalcom, CGTN, Cape Town, South Africa.
At least 131 people have died in Zimbabwe from malaria, and more than 135,000 have been infected, just as the COVID-19 pandemic hits the country. The Health Ministry announced on Twitter on Saturday that over 200 malaria outbreaks have been reported throughout the country, mostly in the provinces of Manicaland, Masvingo, and Mashonaland East. 90 of the outbreaks have been controlled. The country continues to face serious economic challenges under U.S. sanctions, as well as the deterioration of its health systems, so malaria outbreaks have steadily increased. The latest outbreaks are taking place amid the COVID-19 pandemic that has infected 24 and killed 3 people in Zimbabwe. We're taking one last break. Stay with us. Thank you for joining us again. The Center for Communicable Diseases in Qatar has started using plasma for recovered COVID-19 patients to help in the treatment of some critical cases. Some of the recovered patients are donating around 600 milliliters of blood twice a week. Doctors are then extracting a plasma from the blood, which is transfused to patients in a critical condition as part of their treatment. The practice started after Chinese scientists proved that the plasma from recovered patients could work for 70% of infected patients, but the treatment is still in its experimental phase. In other news, the Iranian government confirmed on Sunday that its navy had a confrontation with U.S. naval vessels in the Persian Gulf. Authorities explained that a fleet of 11 Iranian ships came face-to-face with U.S. warships, which in turn performed what has been described as defiant and unprofessional maneuvers. The U.S. warships were eventually forced to leave the area. The Iranian government has announced that increased patrols of the Gulf will happen, adding that such actions by a foreign power are considered a threat to national security and will be met with a decisive response. 16 people were killed in the Canadian province of Nova Scotia as a 51-year-old man embarked on a shooting rampage. The man was identified as Gabriel Wortman. Authorities said he disguised himself as a police officer in uniform at one point and mocked up a car to make it seem like a Royal Canadian Mounted Police cruiser. Police shot down the suspect at a gas station, later announcing that he died.
I hear the shots and I look out and there's a guy running back and forth up beside the what looks to be a police vehicle.
Something that I never ever expect to happen here, this close to home. It's scary, very scary situation.
The number of people killed by COVID-19 in the United States climbed to over 40,000 on Sunday. The U.S. death toll is the highest in the world and is almost 2 times bigger than Italy, which is currently ranked second in terms of fatalities. The death toll has jumped by 10,000 in just 4 days after untested but probable coronavirus fatalities were added. During a briefing on Sunday, New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo announced that the state will perform the most aggressive antibody testing campaign in the whole of the United States next week in order to try and understand how so many people became infected. And Cuomo said that the coronavirus outbreak in the state is on the descent.
Big question of whether we've been past the apex, past the high point. And it turned out the high point wasn't a point, but the high point was a plateau. And we got up to a high point, and then we just stayed at that level for a while. But if the data holds, and if this trend holds, we are past the high point, and all indications at this point are that we are on a descent. Whether or not the descent continues depends on what we do, but right now we are on a descent.
A lone British doctor held a protest outside Downing Street on Sunday to highlight the lack of personal protective equipment for the UK's National Health Services staff. The protest came after the death of Mary Aguapong, a 28-year-old pregnant nurse working in Luton, near London, who died after contracting the virus. Her baby daughter was delivered successfully by cesarean section and is doing well, according to the hospital.
For all the doctors, nurses and healthcare workers who lost their lives tragically and senselessly to COVID. And despite being told we have enough protection, lives are still being lost, vulnerable members of staff are losing their lives, and they're not being taken care of, and we know that because they're dying. We're still in a position where we're on our knees begging for PPE, and if we had enough, we wouldn't have grannies stitching up our masks, and we wouldn't have pensioners raising money for the NHS. It's not a charity. The government should have been prepared a long time ago, and that's why we're in this position now. We're on track to having one of the highest mortality rates of healthcare workers due to COVID in the world, and this is not okay. The government must protect its healthcare workers.
And people from around the Caribbean are sending their solidarity to Venezuela and Cuba amid new attacks from the United States, which have not decreased, even with the COVID-19 pandemic. We have some of those messages from Trinidad and Tobago.
We in the progressive movement in Trinidad and Tobago, we once again stand with the Venezuelan people, a people who continuously are undergoing unfair sanctions by the U.S. government, impeding access to medicine, even during these difficult times of the coronavirus pandemic. We also join the people of the Americas who cry out for peace as the government of President Nicolas Maduro continues to battle on. We therefore call on the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the heads of CARICOM to intervene and send a resounding message that the Caribbean region must remain a zone of peace. While the globe shifts all energy to focus on health, and Venezuela joins Cuba in taking their medical aid abroad to save lives of people everywhere, the United States continues to rear its anarchist head of war as it remains a beacon, not of hope, but of death and destruction under the leadership of President Donald Trump. We therefore join the Venezuelan people and global progressive forces as we state now is a time of international solidarity. It is not a time of imperialism and war. Venezuelan comrades, we stand with you as we say, Unidad, lucha, batalla y victoria. Venceremos.
Today, the focus should be international solidarity. Learn from Cuba and Venezuela, taking medical aid across the globe. Now is a time of international solidarity and not a time of imperialism. Trump, together with the people of Venezuela and all of the CARICOM region who only wants peace, I stand with them and venceremos.
And we agree it's time for international solidarity. With that, we end our news brief, but you can find these and more stories by checking our website, telesurenglish.net. And be sure to also join us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.